Assalamu alaikum students, I hope all of you are doing well. This is the third and the last lesson about writing a fantasy story, and today you're going to write a full-fledged fantasy story. We'll do a quick revision before we move towards our task for today so that we can revise all the points that we discussed in the last two lessons. So let's begin. In the previous lessons, we have discussed about the definition, structure, and elements of a fantasy story, and we learned what goes into the planning of a fantasy story, what are the initial steps, what are the crucial points that you have to remember in order to write a perfect story. We've also watched some videos on YouTube that were useful, I hope, for all of you, and you've learned different elements and steps of fantasy writing from those videos. Today you're going to write a proper fantasy story, as I just told you, and before that we'll do a quick revision. So here are some reminders that are very important, and you have to keep these in mind, and please keep these in front of you while writing a story too, so that you do not do any mistake. First one is, which is important in every task that you do or perform in English language, and that is, make sure your spellings are always correct. Second is, always check that your punctuation is also correct. Punctuation is also an important part of any composition or any task in language, and if you do not put proper punctuation, it just kills the meaning of the whole sentence. So it is important that you put the right punctuation in each sentence. Third is, use a variety of sentences, as I told you before too. Simple, complex, and compound, all these three should be present in your story or in your composition, and your story should be a mixture of these. Now, when I tell you that you have to add variety into sentences, what are the ways that you can add variety? Like, we know that we can add simple sentences, compound sentences, and complex sentences, but what are different varieties within complex and compound sentences that you can add? So as we've discussed before, embedded clauses and semicolons, we have had proper lessons on these two. These were all building blocks that were preparing you for writing a proper composition. So keep those things in mind and use embedded clauses and semicolons in your to add variety into your complex sentences. So it is very difficult that and it is very boring that you use same kind of sentences throughout the story. So in a simple sentence, that would be a proper simple sentence. Compound, you can use different types of conjunctions, and in complex, you can use embedded clauses, and semicolons can be used for both compound and complex sentences. Secondly, add adverbial phrases to make your story more clear and interesting. So adverbial phrases is something that we have done before. Keep those in mind and add them in your story, because adverbial phrases, when you use different types of adverbial phrases, they make your sentence more clear and they make it interesting too. Lastly, focus on showing rather than telling. Again, this is an important point, and we've discussed this earlier too. Please always remember that you have to focus on showing rather than telling in your story, and this can be done by showing how characters are responding to their settings and other characters. So which could be the speech that two characters have, this could be their physical reaction to the setting or the emotional reaction. Show all these emotions, show all these characteristics, so that your readers can enjoy your story. Then read the question and instructions carefully. This is very crucial, and if you do something wrong in this step, your whole story would be a mess. So it is important that you keep in mind that you have to read the question carefully and all the instructions thoroughly and understand them before attempting the composition. For that, what you have to do is, like, if you want to understand your question properly, underline the key points and keywords, analyze them, and understand each word. So there are always some key points and keywords within a question. You have to identify those, underline them for your own convenience, and analyze them and understand them properly. Then use the WH method for initial planning, as we discussed earlier, and afterwards plan the structure of the story accordingly, which would be the paragraphing of the story and what you would include in each paragraph, and that too we have discussed in the last two lessons. So I hope now that we're going to attempt a fantasy story, you are clear about each step, you're clear about the elements that you're going to add in the story, you're clear about the structure of the story, and what goes into the initial planning. Actually, we've done the initial planning. You do not have to do the initial planning now. You just have to open that initial planning that you've done in the previous two tasks, keep that in front of you, and then start writing your story. And the story is going to be about write a fantasy story that begins with two people waiting for something or someone to arrive, and we've done all the initial planning, and we know that what characters we're going to add in the story. So please do not be scared or confused. Use that planning and write a proper story. Go through all the points carefully and then start writing your story. Keep going back to the points throughout the process of writing this fantasy story, because if you won't go back to the points, you may just miss some of the important points. So it is important that you keep going back to it so that you do not miss any important detail. And the word limit for this task is 200 to 250 words. You have to finish your story within this limit, and do proper paragraphing of your story. Divide your story into paragraphs, because that way it becomes more clear. And with this we will end our today's lesson. I hope all of you come forward with very good pieces of fantasy story. I'm looking forward to your work, and good luck. If you have any question regarding this lesson, please feel free to ask in the comment section of your Google Classroom. I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Good luck and Allah Hafiz.